Good evening. Welcome to the Murky Waters Review channel. When it comes to horror genres, different people will be afraid of different things. One person may find ghosts to be terrifying, while others may not be phased at all. Some people may have a fear of feeling small or of being eaten by something bigger than them. If you fall into this category, well, tonight's game Little Nightmares may be just what you're looking for. Or maybe looking to avoid. Enjoy the review. Everybody loves a good horror game during October, don't they? Of course they do. They are a great way to celebrate Halloween, but wouldn't it be nice if every holiday had a horror game you could play? There's a horror movie for every holiday, even Thanksgiving, and while there are no Thanksgiving horror games that come to mind, Little Nightmares may be the closest thing that we have. With the release of the Little Nightmares 2 trailers, I thought it would be a good time to go back and look at the original game, as well as check out the DLC I never got around to. Little Nightmares is a strange one. When it was nearing release, I don't remember hearing much about it. I just remember seeing the game advertised everywhere, and I like the art style as well as the puzzle platform nature of the game. It doesn't take much to convince me to play a horror game, so I picked this one up blind, the collector's edition even. The game was published by Bandai Namco, and when looking up the developer Tarsier Studios, a company I'd never heard of, it looks like they spent the first 7 or so years of their career rehashing Media Molecule DLC and ports. Little Nightmares, however, started brewing as early as 2005, but as a different title, The City of Metronome. The City of Metronome was never released due to the studio not being able to find a publisher, and not much is known about that game. But later on, a new project from the same studio was announced under the title Hunger for the PS4 in 2014, and then Hunger was retitled yet again to Little Nightmares before release. Little Nightmares feels like an obscure and mainstream title all at once, but how exactly did the end results turn out? Let's find out when we review Little Nightmares Complete Edition.
What is going on?
That is the best way I can describe the story in Little Nightmares, as that's exactly how it's presented. The game begins with a short nightmare, and then you take control of the playable character 6. Her backstory is not explained, where you are is not explained, how you got there and how to escape is not explained, you simply wake up and the game begins. The game explains so little about what's going on, I don't even know how I know the girl's name is 6. That's just what it's listed as on the internet. Little Nightmares does not hold your hand in any regard. It expects you to go with the flow, and instead of compelling you to see the rest of the story, it's more like you get sucked in to just wanting to see exactly what's going to be thrown at you next. You see, Little Nightmares will constantly have you asking yourself, why? Like, why is there a piano suspended from the ceiling by ropes? Why is everything so much taller than it needs to be? Why is there a guillotine in a walled-up bathroom? Almost everything you see in the game is insignificant. The only thing you will need to keep focus on is escaping with 6. This was one of the biggest draws for me, wanting to explore the strange world and find out just exactly what's going on. But it never happens. If you go into Little Nightmares looking for a mystery to solve, keep looking because there are no definitive answers here. After you finish the story, you will be left with more questions than answers, and while the story may be shrouded in mystery, it does lend itself to creating an interesting world to explore. The game wouldn't be any fun to explore without an interesting setting to do so in, so how about we talk about what you can expect while exploring. The gameplay in Little Nightmares is different from most horror games that I can think of. It has more in common with older PC and PS1 puzzle platformers such as Oddworld or Heart of Darkness, or in any game like Limbo. The gameplay is all about exploration, puzzles, and good old-fashioned trial and error. 6 has little means of defense outside of using environmental puzzles occasionally to defeat an aggressive pursuer. The core of the gameplay is using stealth to evade predators and moving objects around to solve physics and platform-based puzzles. Moving chairs to reach a high place, jumping onto and pulling switches, running along a narrow path to make a jump at the last second, these are the kinds of things you'll need to do in order for 6 to survive. Let one man's suicide be your puzzle solution. Horrible sights like this are not uncommon in the Maw. The Maw is where Little Nightmares takes place. It is a gigantic ship floating somewhere in the ocean. Not much is explained about the Maw, like who built it, what it's used for, or how it continues to operate, but you can deduce some things from the environmental storytelling. 6 appears to be a small child no more than 10 years old, and throughout trying to escape it's shown that she is not the only child aboard. We see other children every so often and even a nursery. The children are usually enslaved in cages or shackles. Unfortunately, this isn't Oddworld, and Six barely has the means to survive herself, let alone try and help the other unfortunates. The gameplay and story pretty much tie into one another. Predatory residents of the ship are never introduced in any cutscene or cinematic way. They'll just show up, and you'll need to observe their behavior in order to sneak past them. If any of them see Six, they will let out a noise to let the player that they have been spotted and that they are after Six. Running and hiding in a spot they can't reach or climbing to the high ground can sometimes work, but more often than not, if you're caught, and it's back to try again. The game is set up in such a way that being caught while leading to instant death doesn't feel as annoying as it might in other games because that's how the game is built. It expects you to retry until you figure it out. There are no health bars, there are no lives. When Six is captured or misses a jump, it takes the game only seconds and it's back in action. Six will wake up huddled in a corner as if she's had a bad dream, so it's almost like she doesn't actually die if you mess up. Little Nightmares is a somewhat difficult game to talk about gameplay-wise, because this is all there is to it. Move to a new area, examine the threats, examine the roadblock, and figure out how to move forward without being caught. Rinse, repeat. The game will keep your heart rate up when danger is near. Six can crouch or slide with LB, and X is the run button. Jumping is done with the A button, and grabbing onto things is done with RB. These controls will take some getting used to, but the game is built around using all of these mechanics, so it's not like you won't be used to them by the end. But they still feel a bit awkward. I was forgetting to press the grab button while making jumps, which led to my death. However, I'm pretty sure I have dementia, as I can't remember 5 minutes ago, so maybe this is just me. One thing Little Nightmares does well is get the player out of their comfort zone. Lots of the residents can be avoided by slipping into a crack in the wall or the floor, but oftentimes you'll need to get right up on their asses in order to grab a key or pull a switch you need to progress, and sometimes this leads to unavoidable sections where you'll have to alert your pursuer and run because you have no other choice. These sections are certainly pulse pounding, but can lead to some frustration as the game is never totally clear on what you need to do or where you need to go, so you can grab a key and start running only to take a slight wrong turn and get caught. And the game doesn't always send you back to where you think it should. It'll send you back a bit further. Besides the honored guest of the ship, seriously, being a tiny insignificant being with no means to fight back, running from these gargantuan, obese, shambling gluttons who care more about eating you than their own or any other's lives, this would be my own personal hell. But back to my point. Besides running, there will be times where there is no present or immediate danger, and throughout the mall you'll find little creatures known as gnomes who scurry away at the smallest sights and sounds. Some of the gnomes can be followed into a safe place where you can light a lantern for a checkpoint and give the gnomes a comforting hug. Hugging all 13 gnomes will give you an achievement, so that's something to strive for if you finish the game without all of them, but feel like the adventure was a little too short. And that's really the only big thing I have to complain about with Little Nightmares. It's simply too short. The game on a first playthrough, completely blind, shouldn't take you more than about 3 or 4 hours, tops. And it might just be me, but the first half of the game felt much longer than the second half did. I think the reason the game feels this way is that it spends the first half teaching you how to play the game, relying on stealth for a big portion of it, but during the second half it's mostly chase sequences where you'll need to use everything you learned during the first half to escape the second half. And then after the big chase, the last section of the game is an effective build-up to the last boss, and then a so-so last boss fight, and then it's over. Speaking of boss battles, there's really only 2 moments in the main story that can be considered boss battles, and they're nothing too special. Just like the rest of the game, you figure out the puzzle and use the running, jumping, and grabbing skills you've accrued throughout the adventure, and bam, you'll have Six running to the next area before she has time to double-check the corpses. Don't worry though, somebody will eat them. I'm sure of that. So Little Nightmares gameplay is quite good for short chapter by chapter bursts, but if you're like me, you'll probably get sucked in and play through the whole thing in one sitting. Outside of just completing the main objective, there are a few collectibles you can find like the previously mentioned gnomes as well as geisha statues that can be broken open. Breaking all of these will reward you with a mask Six can wear on your next playthrough. The original copy I played was the base game and DLC didn't exist yet. This time playing for this review, I was able to check out all 3 pieces of DLC that make up the Secrets of the Maw. Each episode of this DLC stars a new playable character simply known as the Runaway Kid. He's one of the other random children enslaved on the Maw who managed to slip away. Each episode of the DLC plays different and does a good job of offering something that the base game didn't. For starters, the runaway kid gets his hands on a flashlight that is infinitely better than Six's lighter, and because of this, you won't run into any oil lanterns that need to be lit. The Depths is the first episode of this DLC, and it has the runaway kid backtracking through some areas Six already visited. And at first I thought this new DLC was going to be just regurgitated areas and ideas from the main story, but you soon end up in an entirely new area, a basement of sorts that's been flooded. The gameplay in this one is designed around hastily jumping from floating platforms and avoiding the new resident, the Granny, a half-fish, half-old lady that will kill the runaway kid as soon as she gets her hands on him. The second DLC episode is The Hideaway, and this was my favorite of the new episodes because it has the runaway kid befriending gnomes and gathering lots of them to power a lift on the ship by chucking coal into a giant furnace. It plays like an even more warped Pikmin or Lemmings. The third episode, The Residence, is like a beefed up version of the final chapter of the main game. It's rooms full of puzzles and then a final boss fight. The only new addition in this chapter are Shadow Children. These are new enemies that will try to attack the runaway kid. You can defeat them by shining a flashlight on them Alan Wake style until they disappear. Just don't let them get too close. The ending of the DLC only makes the oppressive atmosphere of the main story that much more of a gut punch, and it doesn't tell us much more than we already knew. But if you like the main game's gameplay and want more, there is no reason not to play through the DLC. It's just more game for your money, and brings the complete package up to a more respectable 5 hours. That's about all there is to say about the gameplay. It's a puzzle platformer with tense and oppressive atmosphere, and the DLC complements the main game. Now let's discuss the other aspects of the game, shall we? Let's talk about Little Nightmares' art style. Growing up, I was your stereotypical goth teen who loved the works of Tim Burton and Jonan Vasquez, and if you are into either of those, I think you'll dig the way Little Nightmares looks. All the residents of the world have an exaggerated and surreal look to them, and the world of the mall, while not wildly varied, has a bit of depth to it. You'll have Six traversing through metal halls, storage rooms, nursery areas, residence quarters, a restaurant, as well as the kitchen, to name a few. Even more so if you include the DLC chapters, and every room is jam-packed with neat or just weird stuff, so you won't get bored exploring. The camera can be controlled with the left stick to see things out of the immediate frame, and the game loves playing tricks on your eyes. A pair of pants hanging in an empty room will be in just the right place to make you think it's someone standing there at first glance, or you might jump at the sight of a pair of shoes before you realize nobody is in them. There are a few secrets to discover as well, like a shadow version of Six that appears just out of frame every time she feeds, something I didn't even know existed before spotting her once, probably the last time she shows up, and then later being told that she appears multiple times. It reminds me of looking for Bloody Gur in Invader Zim. The graphics aren't anything out of this world for what you'd expect from a PS4 or Xbox One game, but they do the job just perfectly. The graphics and character design create a world that's right out of an illustrated children's book. A terrible children's book, full of heinous acts of gluttony incarnate, with horrible monsters that drag you away in the night never to be seen by your family again. What was I talking about? Oh right, the review. The camera obscures things you aren't meant to focus on in that moment, and the color palette is on point for the style they were going for. Everything is drab and bleak looking, it just screams of cold, dark loneliness. Just about the only time you see anything bright and colorful, you won't have time to appreciate it as you'll be busy trying to not get eaten. Six's lighter or the runaway kid's flashlight also light up dark areas in real time. Just flicking the lighter on and off is a joy in itself. Sound design is on point as well. A good set of headphones is always the way to play horror games, and here is no exception. There is very little music in the game. Outside of menus, there really isn't any music at all. The game does not have traditional cutscenes, but it will slow down and take some control away from the player during particularly cinematic scenes, and it's during these moments where you'll hear a bit of music. The music that is there, though, is wonderful and eerie at the same time. Sound effects aren't just done well, but are woven into the gameplay during some sections, like when avoiding the janitor. Six will make noise when running or even walking across hard surfaces, but padded surfaces like a rug or towel will not make noise. When a pursuer is near Six and they know she's there, a heartbeat will pulse in your headset and controller, and it gets more or less intense the closer or further away the threat is. As far as technical issues, I never ran into any on either my PS4 or PC copies. The PC version I played at 1440p, but with the kind of game Little Nightmares is, the PC version didn't really offer a significant enough upgrade over the consoles, so I have no preference on what you should play Little Nightmares on. Just grab it on your favorite platform. Little Nightmares is a delightful game. I enjoyed pretty much every second of it from start to finish, but it's still a hard sell for the length that it is. The world itself is very interesting, but the story is intentionally left as vague as possible. It's the kind of story that wants you to talk about with friends and share theories about how you interpret what was going on. If you're not really interested in the game for the story though, then it's just a weird puzzle platformer that you'll likely have a fun time with. But I don't see many people replaying it again and again. Copies of the game today will set you back $20 to $30, but be patient and wait for a sale and you can grab a digital copy for under $10 on any given platform. If you are looking to pick up a copy, I feel I should mention that there is no physical complete edition available except for the Switch version. The PS4 and Xbox One complete editions come with the exact same disc as the standard edition does, and the DLC is on a voucher. Not a problem if you aren't that big of a collector, but for those of us who enjoy having the most complete and up-to-date version we can get, you'll have to grab a Switch copy, and you'll need to import it from somewhere like PlayAsia or eBay if you live in America, because they only released it digitally here. Everything is on the cartridge from what I've read though, and the Switch is region-free, so all you'll have to deal with is the PAL packaging. Or you can print out my custom Little Nightmares box art that I'll have available later this week. I am giving Little Nightmares a solid B. If you are looking for a truly terrifying horror game, this isn't exactly what you're looking for. But if puzzle platformers and environmental storytelling are your thing, you won't be disappointed in Little Nightmares. If anything, you'll be like me and just want more. Thankfully, Little Nightmares 2 will be out in just a few months, and from the looks of the trailers, it's going to be bigger and better in every way. When that day comes, I hope to see you all back here. That just about wraps it up for tonight. If you liked what you saw here, please feel free to like and subscribe. Tell your friends. I will be back later with the Little Nightmares box art video, and I will see you next time on the Murky Waters review channel. I think I'll go rewatch Blood Rage. I still have a few questions about the validity of the cranberry sauce. Have a nice evening.